Superman, I preemptively put up this soothing... Oh my, I do apologize, but this is a restricted area.
Kal-El lands in a new world and brings not just power, but politics. Welcome to Starlight Production. Today we're reviewing Superman 2025, James Gunn's bold reimagining for the dawn of a new DC universe. With a fresh Superman, global stakes, new allies, and headline-grabbing buzz, is this Kryptonian comeback worth the hype? Let's break it down frame by frame. Opening crisis. Superman David Corenswet averts a war by stopping Baravia's invasion of Jarimper. He's celebrated globally but also condemned. Where is his authority to act? Martial defeat. Facing Ultraman, Superman is beaten. A shocking failure that plunges him into self-doubt and drives him into an emotional spiral. Isolation and rebuilding. Retreating to the fortress in Svalbard and later Antarctica, Kal-El is guided by holograms from his Kryptonian parents and Krypto, the super dog. Return and confrontation. Back in Metropolis with Lois Lane, Rachel Brosnahan, he confronts Luthor's sinister plans, including unleashing the engineer and a monster, while balancing media accountability. Final showdown. Assisted by Justice Gang, Green Lantern Nathan Fillion, Hawkgirl Metamorpho, and Mr. Terrific, he reclaims his heroism and quells Luthor's plot. The movie concludes with emotional resolutions and a lens toward broader DCU scope. 10 chapters of Kryptonian power, human vulnerability, and a hopeful new tone. Development. DC Studios co-CEOs James Gunn and Peter Safran kicked off a fresh DCU, Chapter 1, Gods and Monsters, with Superman as its keystone. Gunn wrote, directed, and produced the film. Budget and shooting. $225 million. Filming in Svalbard, Norway fortress scenes. Trilla Studios, Atlanta, Georgia, and Ohio. Cinematography overseen by Henry Braham. Principal photography ran from February to July 2024. Score. Composers John Murphy and David Fleming infused John Williams' classic Superman theme, refreshed orchestral and choral layers. The soundtrack dropped on July 4th, 2025. David Corenswet, Superman debut turns in a DC spotlight. Praise for vulnerability and sincerity. Kevin Feige notably called a performance genial. Rachel Brosnahan, Lois Lane sharp, witty, earns winning moments in screwball-style scenarios with Clark Kent. Critics like Roger Ebert praise their dynamic. Nicholas Hoult, Lex Luthor depicted as a tech bro billionaire antagonist. Some backlash for perceived caricature. Hoult designed as Luthor with inspiration from comics like Man of Steel. Justice Gang, Nathan Fillion, Green Lantern. Isabella Merced, Hawkgirl, Eddie Gathegi, Mr. Terrific, Anthony Kerrigan, Metamorpho, Skylar Gisondo, Jimmy Olsen, contributing to cinematic world building. Superdog Krypto and Cameos. Krypto steals the spotlight. Friendly cameos deepen the DCU universe. Location choices. Svalbard Selection Fortress, Indiana-based sound stages, land/CGI blended world building. Shot in IMAX format with stylized visual palettes. Visual effects, massive scale, city-destroying kaiju, digital reimaginings. Complaints of occasional CGI dropouts, especially eye-related battle injuries. Tone and dialogue, a cleaner, more humane approach. Humor-laced exchanges, screwball banner, debates about power and ethics. Roger Ebert described it as a crisp, modern comedy with serious undertones. Worldwide launch, July 11, 2025. Opening day, $56.5 million in the U.S., the second best of 2025. Box office, $406.8 million globally, strong, but below initial profitable benchmarks. Marketing highlights. Trail mixes of John Williams' nostalgia and upbeat top trailers. Superman statues debut in London. Worldwide fan event, aligned with the DCU reboot panorama. Box office and critic scores. Cinema Score A. RT shows 85% positive rating. Critics applaud Corenswet and Brosnahan's chemistry and new tone. Peer praise. Kevin Feige commended Gunn and Corenswet for launching the new DCU. Innovative identity. The Guardian and Vox trace political themes to Superman's immigrant and socialist foundations. Cultural hotspot. Conservative backlash accuses of being super woke, immigration metaphors. Visual grit. Some consider CGI exposed. Eye attacks deemed grotesque or fetishized. General disappointment. For example, Forbes labeled it painfully mediocre and generic. Reddit reactions. Mixed fan responses. Some felt the pacing and mixed diluted emotive depth. Gunn emphasizes Kal-El as an outsider. Criticized as woke, yet aligning historically with the character's immigrant origin. Figures like Grant Morrison note Superman's early socialist ideals. The Superman loses. He struggles. He questions authority. A departure from behemoth gods of Snyder's DCU. Now a relatable human with godlike powers. The Borovia war and punishment arc evokes questions. When is heroism overreach? Lois Lane's tough journalism interrogates this explicitly. Justice Gang introduction reflects Gunn's universe-building model and Marvel mimicry. Some see it as diluting Superman's solo hero moment. Others welcome shared heroism. Screwball banner, cosmic dogs, and romantic tension. Gunn balances weight and whimsy, but some find this directional split hollow or gimmicky. Superman 2025 is a polished new beginning. It introduces emotional vulnerability, new faces, and refreshing worldview, but it trembles with tonal inconsistency and grand spectacle that sometimes overshadows undertones. It dares to reimagine, yet clings to old icons. Rating 7 out of 10. Corenswet's sincerity, Lois charm, immigrant narrative, new Justice Gang, CGI hiccups, intermittent pacing, mixed critical culture battle, polarized fan opinions. Superman is a 2025 American superhero film based on the eponymous character from DC Comics. Written and directed by James Gunn, it is the first film in the DC Universe, DCU, produced by DC Studios and the second reboot of the Superman film series. The film stars David Corenswet as Clark Kent/Superman, alongside Rachel Brosnahan, Nicholas Hoult, Eddie Gathegi, Anthony Carrigan, Nathan Fillion, and Isabella Merced. After Superman intervenes in an international conflict orchestrated by billionaire Lex Luthor, he faces unintended consequences and must win back public support with the help of his reporter and superhero colleagues. Development on a sequel to the DC Extended Universe, DCU, film Man of Steel, 2013, began by October 2014, with Henry Cavill set to reprise his role as Superman. Plans changed after the troubled production of Justice League, 2017, and the Man of Steel sequel was no longer moving forward by May 2020. Gunn began work on a new Superman film around August 2022. In October, he became co-CEO of DC Studios with producer Peter Safran, and they began work on a new DC universe. Gunn was publicly revealed to be writing the film in December. The title Superman Legacy was announced the next month. Gunn was confirmed to be directing in March 2023, and Corenswet and Brosnahan were cast that June. The subtitle was dropped by the end of February 2024, when filming began in Svalbard, Norway. Production primarily took place at Trilla Studios in Atlanta, Georgia, with location filming around Georgia and Ohio. Filming wrapped in July. The film's influences include the comic book All-Star Superman, 2005 to 2008, by Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely. Superman premiered at the TCL Chinese Theater on July 7th, 2025, and was released by Warner Brothers Pictures in the United States on July 11th. It is the first film in the DCU's Chapter 1, Gods and Monsters. The film received generally positive reviews and has grossed $407 million worldwide, making it the 10th highest grossing film of 2025. Story follows as Clark Kent/Superman stops the nation of Borovia from invading the neighboring country of Jarinpur and warns Boravian President Vasil Gurkos to leave Jarinpur alone. In Metropolis, Superman is defeated for the first time by a metahuman called the Hammer of Borovia and flees to his fortress of solitude in Antarctica with the help of the superpowered dog Crypto. They are followed by Angela Spica/the Engineer, an ally of billionaire Lex Luthor. Superman's robots use concentrated solar radiation to heal him and comfort Superman with a message from his birth parents, Jor-El and Lara Lorvan, who sent on Earth to save him from the destruction of their planet Krypton. The message was damaged during the journey, so only the first half can be played. Superman returns to Metropolis and is again beaten by the Hammer, who is secretly Luthor's metahuman Ultraman. Superman agrees to be interviewed by Lois Lane, his girlfriend and reporter colleague at the Daily Planet, leading to an argument when Lois presses him on the legal and ethical implications of his actions in Borovia. Luthor unleashes a kaiju on Metropolis as a distraction while he infiltrates the fortress with Ultraman and the Engineer. They overpower the robots, capture Crypto, and discover the Kryptonian message. The Engineer restores the damaged portion. Superman rescues civilians while fighting the kaiju with the Justice Gang, a team composed of heroes Green Lantern, Mr. Terrific, and Hawkgirl. Despite Superman wanting to take the creature alive, Mr. Terrific kills it. Luthor broadcasts the Kryptonian message, and Superman is shocked to hear the second half, in which his parents urge him to conquer Earth and take many wives to restore the Kryptonian race. Public opinion turns against Superman, especially when he angrily confronts Luthor looking for Crypto. Lois reassures Superman that she believes he is good, and he confesses his love for her before surrendering himself to the U.S. government. They hand him over to Luthor for detainment and questioning inside an artificial pocket universe, where Luthor secretly holds his enemies, including Crypto. Superman is imprisoned with the metahuman Metamorpho. Luthor uses Metamorpho's infant son Joey as leverage to force him to transmute his body into kryptonite, rendering Superman powerless. While questioning Superman, Luthor murders his supporter Malik Ali, which horrifies Metamorpho. The latter helps Superman escape, and they free Joey and Crypto. Lois convinces Mr. Terrific to help find Superman, and they enter the Pocket Universe, rescuing the others. Lois takes Superman to recuperate with his adopted human parents, Jonathan and Martha Kentucky. Jonathan tells the demoralized Superman that his actions determine who he is, not the message from his birth parents. Luthor's girlfriend Eve Teschmacher, who is infatuated with Daily Planet photographer Jimmy Olsen, provides evidence to the Daily Planet that Luthor is aiding Borovia in return for half of Jarinpur's territory. Luthor imprisons her and lures Superman back to Metropolis by opening an unstable portal to the Pocket Universe, which creates a growing rift in reality. Superman sends Green Lantern, Hawkgirl, and Metamorpho to stop Borovia from invading Jarinpur again. Hawkgirl kills Gurkos, and Green Lantern invites Metamorpho to join the Justice Gang. In Metropolis, Superman and Mr. Terrific fight the Engineer and Ultraman. Superman defeats the Engineer and learns that Ultraman is a clone of himself. Luthor is so intent on defeating Superman that he refuses to close the rift, which splits the city in half. Superman and Crypto defeat Ultraman, who is pulled into a black hole beneath the rift, and then they detain Luthor at his headquarters. Mr. Terrific closes the rift while Superman challenges Luthor's ideology and expresses hope that Luthor will one day accept the humanity in both of them. Lois and Jimmy expose Luthor's schemes to the public, clearing Superman's name. Luthor and his associates are arrested, and those trapped in his pocket universe, including Eve, are freed. Lois confesses that she loves Clark too. As Superman recovers at the fortress, his cousin Kara Zor-El drunkenly arrives to pick up Crypto. The robots comfort Superman with footage of his childhood on Earth with his human parents. Cast as Clark Kent actor David Corenswet during filming in 2024, wearing glasses and a suit while carrying a newspaper and a briefcase. Lois Lane actress Rachel Brosnahan during filming in 2024, holding an umbrella. Superman stars David Corenswet top and Rachel Brosnahan bottom during filming in June 2024. David Corenswet as Clark Kent/Superman, a survivor from the destroyed planet Krypton who lives on Earth as a superhero. He maintains a separate identity at his day job working as a journalist for the Daily Planet in Metropolis. Director James Gunn said Corenswet Superman is around 25 years old, making him more established than Tom Welling's version from the CW series Smallville, 2001 to 2011, but younger than Henry Cavill's version in the DC Extended Universe, DCU. Producer Peter Safran described the film's take on a character for the DC Universe, DCU, as the embodiment of truth, justice, and the American way, and kindness in a world that thinks of kindness as old-fashioned. Gunn said Clark is becoming successful as both a journalist and a superhero in the film, but new elements in his life leave him unbalanced. These include being madly in love with his colleague Lois Lane and making friends with other superheroes who think he is naive. The film shows how these elements impact Clark's values and choices, which are flawed and put him on a personal journey. Corenswet differentiated the role between Clark's interactions with his parents, his job at the Daily Planet, and as Superman. He described Superman as a public-facing character who wants to present himself as calm but with authority. Corenswet drew inspiration for Clark from the comic book All-Star Superman, 2005 to 2008, by Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely, and the posture Christopher Reeve portrayal from the 1978 to 87 Superman film series. He was also inspired for Clark's voice and demeanor by his brother-in-law, whom he described as the quietest, most wonderful man despite his tall 6 feet 8 inches, 2.03 meters, height and weighing 270 pounds, and described Clark as a big presence who is desperately trying to be as small as possible and as quiet as possible. Gunn consulted DC Comics writer Tom King regarding other characters' suspension of disbelief regarding Clark's dual identity, which was attributed to the use of hypnotic glasses to subtly distort his appearance. Gunn included this in the film, noting that it had kind of been forgotten from the comic book canon. Corenswet also portrays Ultraman, an armored clone of Superman created by Lex Luthor, who masquerades as a Hammer of Borovia. Rachel Brosnahan as Lois Lane, a reporter for the Daily Planet who is a colleague of Clark, and isn't so sure about him and needs to be convinced about being in a relationship with him. Brosnahan described Lois as fiercely intelligent and feisty. She consulted with several journalists to help her portray Lois as a modern reporter, contrasted with the character's original comics appearances and previous screen portrayals. Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor, the CEO of Luthor Corp and the arch-nemesis of Superman, who hates Superman for having the power to do everything but not aligning with Luthor's own beliefs. Holt described Luthor as obsessive, determined, and relentless, and wanted the character to feel like a credible threat to Superman. He has his end goal in sight and is motivated by many emotions, including a need to be recognized for his scientific genius. Holt was inspired by Michael Rosenbaum's Lex Luthor in Smallville and by billionaire Steve Jobs for Luthor's uniform, choosing to work out for the role based on the depiction of Luthor in All-Star Superman. Holt's head was shaved by his son Joaquin in preparation for the role. Gunn took inspiration for the character from Brian Azzarello's limited comic book series, Lex Luthor, Man of Steel, 2005, as well as Jerry Siegel's reckless scientific genius version of Luthor in comic books from the 1950s and 1960s. Eddie Gathegi as Michael Holt / Mr. Terrific, a superhero and inventor who uses a variety of high-tech gadgets to fight crime, and is a member of the Justice Gang sponsored by Maxwell Lord. Gathegi described his character as an atheist who believes in justice, and said Holt found meaning in knowledge after experiencing the death of his wife. Anthony Kerrigan as Rex Mason / Metamorpho, an archaeologist and superhero who can transmute elements in his body into various forms. He becomes a member of the Justice Gang. 517 to 604. 854 Kerrigan said it was refreshing to play a superhero after previously portraying the Batman villain Victor Zash in the television series Gotham, 2014 to 2019. He felt that he could bring some authenticity and truth to the role by comparing Metamorpho's concerns about his abilities to Kerrigan's own alopecia. Nathan Fillion as Guy Gardner / Green Lantern, an abrasive galactic peacekeeper in the Green Lantern Corps and a Justice Gang member, whom Fillion described as a fearless, overconfident jerk. Fillion drew inspiration for Gardner, speaking his mind with no filter from Estelle Getty's Sophia Petrillo from the sitcom The Golden Girls, 1985 to 1992. Fillion referred back to the character's origin story, in which Gardner was hit by a bus and in a coma, as what flipped the switch for his personality. making him off a little bit. The film retains the character's iconic bowl-cut haircut from the comics, which Fillion insisted on having despite some discussions about changing his hairstyle. Isabella Merced as Kendra Saunders / Hawkgirl, a superhero with wings and various melee weapons who is a Justice Gang member. She is reincarnated from an alien, retaining her memories and past trauma with a grumpy demeanor. Merced felt the self-awareness and comedic aspects of the film helped Saunders make light of her trauma. Merced's short 5 feet 1 inch, 1.55 meters, height differentiates her from other DCU heroes. Merced felt that her role as Anya Corazon in the Sony Spider-Man universe film Madam Web 2024 helped prepare her to play Hawkgirl, though she did not tell the Superman filmmakers about that role in case they did not want her to play both. Additionally, Skylar Gisondo plays Jimmy Olsen, a boyish young photographer who is Clark and Lois's closest colleague, while Sarah Sampaio plays Eve Teschmacher, Luthor's assistant and girlfriend who is secretly also involved with Jimmy. Sampaio felt comfortable performing with Hoult for her scenes, having worked with him prior on a campaign for Armani. Wendell Pierce plays Perry White, the editor-in-chief of the Daily Planet. Pierce said that Perry is always grumpy because Luthor had an affair with Perry's wife, and that Perry's second child may actually be Luthor's. Pierce said Perry's driving force throughout the film was wanting to get to Luthor in light of this. 1619 to 1643, Pierce asked his friends for information on the character because he did not read comic books growing up. Other staff at the Daily Planet include Beck Bennett as reporter Steve Lombard, Michaela Hoover as columnist Cat Grant, and Christopher McDonald as reporter Ron Troop. Pruitt Taylor Vince and Neva Howell respectively played Jonathan and Martha Kent, Clark's adoptive human parents. Vince and Howell studied tapes of the parents of the Howard Stern Show personality and charred walls of the Damned drummer Richard Christie to develop their cans and accents in the film. Maria Gabriela DeFari appears as Angela Spica / the Engineer, an ally of Luthor whose abilities come from nanotechnology built into her body and has an edge ahead of a planned film about the Authority, the team that she is a member of in the comics. Zlatko Burek appears as Vasil Gurkos, the president of Borovai who is a political ally of Luthor, while Terrence Rosemore and Stephen Blackheart appear as Luthor's henchman Otis Berg and Luthor Corp's scientist Sidney Happerson, respectively, and Trevor Newland as Mr. Handsome, a humanoid creature created by Luthor. Frank Grillo reprises his role as ARGUS director Rick Flag Sr. from the animated DCU series Creature Commandos 2024 present. Tanashi Kajis Bolden reprises a role from the DCU film The Suicide Squad 2021 as ARGUS member Flo Crawley. Millie Alcock has an uncredited cameo appearance as Superman's cousin Kara Zor-El / Supergirl ahead of her own film Supergirl 2026. John Cena has an uncredited cameo appearance as Christopher Smith / Peacemaker on a news show, Mocking Superman, ahead of his role in the second season of Gunn's DC series Peacemaker 2025. And comedian Michael Ian Black appears as Cleves Thornweight, the host of the news show who interviews and interacts with Luthor throughout the film. Gunn's brother Sean has a cameo appearance as tech billionaire businessman Maxwell Lord, the head of Lord Tech who funds the corporate-sponsored Justice Gang. Sean said they ignored past depictions of Lord when creating their version, including Peter Facinelli's portrayal in the Arrowverse series Supergirl 2015 to 2021, and Pedro Pascal's in the DCU film Wonder Woman 1984-2020. Bradley Cooper, who previously collaborated with Gunn in his Guardians of the Galaxy films, and Angela Serafian portrays Superman's Kryptonian parents, Jor-El and Lara Lorvan, in a sequence where a recorded message of theirs is played back as Superman heals. Alan Tudyk, Grace Chan, prior Gunn collaborators Michael Rooker and Palm Clementif, and Gunn's wife Jennifer Holland voiced the Superman robots, who aid Superman at the Fortress of Solitude. The former for respectively voice for, later renamed Gary, 12, 1, and 5, while Holland is uncredited. Christopher Reeve's son, ABC News correspondent Will Reeve makes a cameo appearance as an on-the-ground news reporter. Michael Rosenbaum, who previously portrayed Luthor in Smallville, voices one of Luthor's Raptor guards. Louisa Krause has a non-speaking cameo as Sapphire Stagg, Metamorpho's wife. Dinesh Tyagarajan plays Malik Ali, a falafel cart vendor who is acquainted with Superman. Dog actor Deleen stood in for Clark's superpowered dog Crypto, whom Gunn described as a not-so-good good boy. The character was primarily created with visual effects and was 3D modeled after Gunn's dog Ozu. Production: Warner Brothers Pictures was planning in 2012 for the film Man of Steel 2013, based on the DC Comics character Superman, to start a shared universe, which became known as the DC Extended Universe, DCU. They announced a full slate of DC films in October 2014, prioritizing Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice 2016, as the second DCU film after Man of Steel failed to meet the studio's financial expectations. Despite this, they said an undated sequel to Man of Steel was in development, with Henry Cavill set to reprise his role as Clark Kent/Superman. Man of Steel director Zack Snyder said they have been considering the imprisoned Kryptonians from the first film and the character Brainiac as antagonists for the sequel before work began on Batman v Superman. A Man of Steel sequel was in active development as a top priority for the studio in August 2016, which Cavill's manager Danny Garcia confirmed the following month. Amy Adams, who portrayed Lois Lane in Man of Steel, said in November that the studio was working on the screenplay. Matthew Vaughn was Warner Brothers' top choice to direct the film and had preliminary conversations about it by March 2017. Vaughn and comic book writer Mark Miller previously pitched a new Superman trilogy prior to the development of Man of Steel, in which the destruction of the planet Krypton would not occur until after Superman had already grown up on the planet. After the troubled production of the DCU film Justice League, 2017, Warner Brothers rethought its approach to DC projects. By the end of 2017, a Man of Steel sequel was not coming anytime soon, if at all. Justice League producer Charles Roven said story ideas had been discussed, but there was no script. Before the release of Mission Impossible Fallout in July 2018, director Christopher McQuarrie and co-star Cavill pitched their take on a new Superman film, partially inspired by the animated film Up 2009, but Warner Brothers did not pursue the idea. Later in 2018, the studio asked James Gunn to write and direct a Superman film, but he was uncertain if he wanted to take on the character. He did not have a clear vision, especially since Superman is a well-known character unlike the Guardians of the Galaxy, whom he adapted from Marvel Studios in the film Guardians of the Galaxy 2014. Gunn chose to make the Suicide Squad 2021 instead, calling it the easier path. In September, negotiations for Cavill to reprise his role for a cameo appearance in Shazam 2019 ended due to contract issues, as well as a scheduling conflict with Cavill's Fallout commitments. Cavill was reported to be parting ways with the studio, with no plans for him to reprise his role in future projects. But Cavill said in November 2019 that he had not given up on the character and still wanted to do the role justice. At that time, Warner Brothers was unsure which direction to take the character and was talking to high-profile talent about the property, including J.J. Abrams, whose company Bad Robot signed an overall deal with Warner Brothers' parent company Warner Media, and Michael B. Jordan, who pitched himself as a black version of the character. By May 2020, Warner Brothers was no longer developing a Man of Steel sequel, but Cavill was in talks to appear in a different DC film. In February 2021, Ta-Nehisi Coates was revealed to be writing a new Superman film that Abrams was producing. The film was expected to feature a black actor portraying Superman, with the potential for Jordan to take on the role. Development: filmmaker James Gunn during filming in June 2024. Writer and director James Gunn, pictured during filming in June 2024, began work on a new Superman film in August 2022. In April 2022, Discovery Incorporated and Warner Media merged to become Warner Brothers Discovery, WBD, led by President and CEO David Zaslav. The new company was expected to restructure DC Entertainment, and Zaslav began searching for an equivalent to Marvel Studios president Kevin Feige to lead the new subsidiary. Zaslav and WBD felt DC lacked a coherent creative and brand strategy and were underusing Superman. Over the years, Gunn considered how he would approach Superman if he were ever given another opportunity, and around late August 2022, he was hired to work on a Superman film that was not a sequel to Man of Steel and would be standalone from the DCU. Zaslav spent time with Gunn while he was writing the script. Cavill made a cameo appearance in the post-credit scene of the DCU film Black Adam, released in October 2022, and Warner Brothers was reportedly pursuing a Cavill-led Man of Steel sequel once again. Roven was producing, and the studio was searching for writers. They wanted McQuarrie to direct, but he was unlikely to be available due to his commitments to the Mission Impossible franchise. Coates' film was still in development. Cavill's role in Black Adam was approved by Warner Brothers film chiefs Michael DeLuca and Pamela Abdy when they were approached directly by Black Adam star Dwayne Johnson. Johnson began promoting the idea of a Black Adam versus Superman film co-starring Cavill. The latter signed a one-off deal for Black Adam and only received a verbal agreement that he would continue playing the character in the DCU. Cavill publicly announced that he would return as Superman for future projects and said his Black Adam cameo was a very small taste of future plans. In '97, he said Superman would be enormously joyful moving forward. Stephen Knight wrote a script treatment for the sequel around that time, which reportedly included Brainiac as the antagonist, but Warner Brothers executives were not thrilled with his take. Michael Bay was eyed to potentially direct the film. Gunn and the Suicide Squad producer Peter Safran were announced as the co-chairs and co-CEOs of the newly formed DC Studios at the end of October 2022. A week after starting their new roles, the pair had begun developing an 8 to 10-year plan for a new DC universe, DCU, that would be a soft reboot of the DCU. In mid-November, Gunn was publicly revealed to be writing a new DC film. Andy Muschietti, director of the DCU film The Flash 2023, expressed interest in directing a Superman project with similar tone to director Richard Donner's film Superman 1978. In early November, Cavill expressed interest in a future project that explored Superman's capacity to give and to love the people of Earth and to inspire others, and said he was looking forward to meeting with Gunn to discuss future opportunities. Work on the Man of Steel sequel stalled later that month, while Gunn and Safran were developing their plans. In December 2022, Gunn said Superman was a big priority, if not the biggest, for DC Studios, before publicly announcing that he was writing a new Superman film. The film was set to focus on a younger version of the character and would therefore not star Cavill. There was potential for Gunn to also direct the film. It would not retell the origin of Superman and would focus on him as a young reporter interacting with key characters such as Lois Lane. Gunn and Safran met with Cavill to explain their decision and discuss potentially working with him for a different role in the future. On January 31st, 2023, Gunn and Safran unveiled the first projects from their DCU slate, which begins with Chapter 1, Gods and Monsters. Their Superman film was the first film in that chapter and was officially titled Superman: Legacy. It was given a release date of July 11, 2025, which coincided with the birthday of Gunn's late father. Safran wanted Gunn to direct the film. Gunn said Superman: Legacy would take specific inspiration from the comic book All-Star Superman, 2005 to 2008, by Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely. The film was also inspired by the Superman animated shorts, 1941 to 1943, and the Superman, the animated series, 1996 to 2000, and by other comics books such as Superman, Birthright, 2003-04, The Brainiac Story Arc, 2008, Superman, Ending Battle, 2002, Superman for All Seasons, 1998, Kingdom Come, 1996, Morrison's Action Comics run, and Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, 1986. DCU writer Tom King said in March 2023 that Gunn was also directing the film, which Gunn confirmed later that month. At that time, Safran was confirmed to be producing the film, doing so through production company The Safran Company, with Gunn also producing through a production company Troll Court Entertainment. Gunn was hesitant to direct the film, despite encouragement from Safran and others, until he realized how focusing on Superman's heritage with his aristocratic Kryptonian parents and adoptive farmer parents from Smallville, Kansas, would inform the characterization. Gunn felt emotionally connected to this aspect of the film because of his late father. He said in April that the film's tone would differ from his Guardians of the Galaxy films, 2014 to 2023, and he suggested that Superman's dog Krypto could appear. Pre-production, production design, costume design, and casting began in April 2023. Production designer Beth Mickle and costume designer Judianna Makovsky returned from the Suicide Squad and Gunn's Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, 2023. Filming was set to begin in January 2024. Gunn said the character Jimmy Olsen would appear. He did not intend for the film to be a comedy and hoped it would differ from previous Superman films while respecting what came before. Gunn completed the first draft of the script at the end of April. Production was not expected to be impacted by the 2023 Writers Guild of America strike, when it began in early May, during the 2023 labor strikes. Image of David Corenswet suiting up as Superman, while an alien-looking threat attacks in the background. Promotional image which revealed star David Corenswet in costume as Superman for the first time. Gunn was looking for an actor to play Superman who possessed the character's humanity, kindness, and compassion, and was somebody who you want to give a hug. Audition tapes for the main roles of Superman, Lois Lane, and Lex Luthor were submitted by early May 2023. Gunn began watching them later that month, while he was storyboarding the film. At this point, Gunn watched the film Pearl, 2022, and David Corenswet's performance in it stood out to him. Corenswet had previously expressed his desire to portray Superman, and his audition was one of the first Gunn saw. Corenswet became a top contender for Superman and was set to do a screen test by early June. Jacob Elordi, Tom Brittney, and Andrew Richardson were also in consideration, though Elordi declined to read for the role. Patrick Schwarzenegger, the Arrowverse series Supergirl 2015 to 2021, guest star Pearson Fode, and Jack Quaid, the voice of Superman in the animated series My Adventures with Superman 2023 present, all submitted self-tapes for Superman. Emma Mackey, Rachel Brosnahan, Samara Weaving, and Phoebe Dynevor tested for Lane. Dynevor was one of the final contenders. Brosnahan made an audition tape with her husband Jason Ralph, who read Superman's lines. Nicholas Hoult, the runner-up to play Bruce Wayne/Batman in the standalone DC film The Batman 2022, was eyed for Luthor but chose to pursue the role of Superman instead, because he felt while he could play Luthor well, he insisted himself to focus on auditioning for Superman. Gunn considered A-list actors he had already worked with for Luthor and discussed the role with a Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 actor that was reported to be Bradley Cooper. Black actors were also being considered. Testing took place using the label Apex, a reference to a comic version of Luthor called Apex Luthor. Other superheroes were expected to be established in the film setting, with casting underway for a black actor to play Michael Holt/Mr. Terrific, and for an Asian or Latina actress to portray a character labeled Blitz. In-person screen tests took place at the Warner Brothers Studios lot in Burbank, California, with Gunn and Safran in mid-June 2023. The actors tested in makeup and costume as Kent and Lane in the following pairs: Hoult and Brosnahan, Brittney and Dynevor, and Corenswet and Mackey. The Kent contenders then tested in costume as Superman against Mackey, one of Cavill's original DCU Superman suits, which was in poor condition, was used for the tests. Gunn said Brittney messed it up, and then it was torn to shred by Corenswet, who was too tall. Gunn edited the test together to be played for a deciding committee that included Zaslav, and the casting of Corenswet as Superman and Brosnahan, as Lane was announced on June 27th. Gunn personally contacted the actors to inform them of their castings, and he offered the role of Superman to Corenswet while he was filming Twisters 2024, on the condition that he treat everyone involved in the film with kindness and respect, citing his experiences with Chris Pratt, Peter Quill/Star-Lord in the MCU, and John Cena, Christopher Smith/Peacemaker in the DCU, doing the same. Casting for other roles was set to follow, including for members of the superhero team The Authority, who were expected to be introduced in Superman, legacy ahead of a planned film about the team. Brothers Alexander and Bill Skarsgård were on the short list for Luthor. It was unclear if Hoult would return to try for Luthor again, but Gunn later contacted Hoult about playing Luthor, which he accepted after realizing he was more suited for that role. Reportedly, Hoult was the highest paid actor in Superman and was eligible for bonuses based on the film's success. On July 11, 2023, 2 years before the film's scheduled release date, the casting of Isabella Merced, Eddie Gathegi, and Nathan Fillion, respectively, as the superheroes Kendra Saunders/Hawkgirl, Mr. Terrific, and Guy Gardner/Green Lantern was announced. Merced tested as Barbara Gordon/Batgirl for the unreleased DCU film Batgirl, while Fillion starred in several of Gunn's earlier films, including as Corey Pitzner/TDK in The Suicide Squad, and had previously voiced fellow Green Lantern Hal Jordan in several animated projects. Gathegi was cast over 200 other actors. Anthony Kerrigan, who expressed interest in playing Luthor, was cast as the superhero Rex Mason/Metamorpho the next day. Gunn chose some of these actors some time earlier, but had been waiting until Superman and Lane were cast before negotiating further actor deals, leaving little time to complete negotiations before the 2023 SAG-AFTRA strike began on July 14th. In response to concern that other superheroes would take away from the story of Superman and Lane, Gunn said those two characters remained the film's focus, and the other actors were being cast for multiple DCU projects. He later elaborated that a large cast of characters was included in the film because he wanted to explore Clark Kent's interactions with his colleagues and Superman's interactions with other superheroes, and show how those groups impact the characters' values and choices. Jimmy Olsen actor Skylar Gisondo during filming in June 2024. Cat Grant actress Michaela Hoover during filming in June 2024. Eve Teschmacher actress Sarah Sampaio during filming in June 2024. Superman supporting cast member Skylar Gisondo left, Michaela Hoover center, and Sarah Sampaio right during filming in June 2024. When the WGA strike ended in September 2023, Superman Legacy was expected to begin filming in early to mid-2024. 153 Jason Momoa, who portrayed Aquaman in the DCU, was reported the following month to have discussed portraying the character Lobo in either this film or solo film. He was later cast in that role for the DCU film Supergirl 2026, originally titled Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow. The SAG-AFTRA strike ended on November 9th, and filming was clarified to be beginning in March 2024. Gunn said the film would still make its July 2025 release date. Maria Gabriela de Faria was revealed to be cast as Angela Spica/The Engineer, one of the film's antagonists and a member of the Authority, in mid-November. Madison Beer said she submitted a self-tape and unsuccessfully auditioned for a role, as did O'Shea Jackson Jr. Hoult was in talks to portray Luthor prior to the SAG-AFTRA strike, and negotiations for the role were continuing in November, when Skylar Gisondo and Sarah Sampaio were revealed to have been respectively cast as Jimmy Olsen and Luthor's assistant Eve Teschmacher. Gunn said Gisondo, Sampaio, and Faria had been cast prior to the strike, and the roles of Mr. Terrific and Teschmacher were particularly difficult to cast and required many auditions. In December 2023, Gunn's brother Sean was cast as Maxwell Lord for future DCU projects, after Pedro Pascal played the role in the DCU film Wonder Woman 1984-2020. The character was expected to be referenced in Superman Legacy, but it was unknown if he would appear in the film. James Gunn confirmed that Hoult had finalized a deal to portray Luthor, and Miriam Shore entered negotiations for an undisclosed role after appearing in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. The Hollywood Reporter also said the cast included Sean Gunn and Palm Clementif, who starred in the Guardians of the Galaxy films, before James Gunn stated that Clementif was not involved in the film and Shore had not been cast. He added that the film's script had been mostly completed before the writer's strike. Gunn said in January that work on the sets, prosthetics, and visual effects models were underway. The costumes were being completed, and most of the actors have been cast. 170 Brosnahan said the film was being made with a lot of love for the source material, as many cast and crew members had grown up watching Superman films and reading the comics. At the end of the month, Millie Alcock was cast as Superman's cousin Kara Zor-El/Supergirl. The character was reported to be making her debut in Superman Legacy ahead of starring in her own DCU film, Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow. Alcock had performed auditions and screen tests in costume on the Superman Legacy set in Atlanta, Georgia, earlier in January. Pre-production work in Ohio began in early February 2024, with the Ohio Department of Development announcing that Superman Legacy will be partially filmed in Cleveland and Cincinnati. The film was awarded over $11 million through the state's tax credit program, based on a $37 million spent in the state out of the film's reported total gross production budget of $363.8 million. Gunn disputed the accuracy of this budget, which would have made it one of the most expensive superhero films ever made. The film was later reported to have a net production budget of $225 million, with incentives and tax breaks factored in. Also in February, Bassem Youssef said he had been cast in the film, reportedly as Rahman Harjadi, the leader of a fictional Middle Eastern country, but his character was removed from the script. He believed this was potentially due to comments he made in October 2023 criticizing the Israeli government during the Gaza war. Gunn disputed this, explaining that he discussed a role with Youssef before the WGA strike, but the actor had not been formally offered the part, and the character was removed after the strike ended and before Youssef's comments were made. A table read with the cast was held on February 22nd, and Gunn revealed that Terrence Rosemore was portraying Luther's henchman Otis Berg after having small roles in some of Gunn's prior films. Zaslav said filming would begin the following week, when Gunn announced that he had shortened the film's title to Superman. He had come to feel while writing the film that it was about looking forward while the legacy subtitle was about looking backward. Filming. Principal photography began on February 29th, 2024, which is Superman's birthday in the comic books. Filming took place in the Adventdalen Valley in Svalbard, Norway, for 1 week to shoot scenes featuring the Fortress of Solitude. Gunn chose Svalbard for its natural beauty, landscapes, and similarities to Antarctica, where the fortress is located. Filming occurred under the working title Genesis. Henry Braham returned as cinematographer from the later two Guardians of the Galaxy films, The Suicide Squad and The Flash. The entire film was shot using IMAX certified red digital cinema cameras. Filming was delayed from an initial January 2024 start by the SAG-AFTRA strike and was expected to last around 4 months. Effects studio Legacy Effects worked on the film's practical effects. Legacy Effects contributed character design, prosthetic makeup, specialty suits, and animatronics to the production. A Metropolis police car on a Cleveland street in the foreground with a "Greetings from Metropolis" sign in the background. The entrance to the Daily Planet Leader building in Cleveland with a world globe above the center door. A police car and buildings decorated with Metropolis decal left, and the Leader building decorated as the entrance to the Daily Planet right. During location filming in Cleveland in June 2024. Wendell Pierce was cast as Perry White at the start of March. Filming at Trilla Studios in Atlanta, Georgia, had begun by March 8th and was expected to last until August 2nd. Filming in Cleveland and Cincinnati was set to take 37 days between April 1st and August 23rd. Filming was also expected to take place in Macon, Georgia. In April, Pruitt Taylor Vince and Neva Howell were cast as Jonathan and Martha Kent in April, while Beck Bennett, Michaela Hoover, and newcomer Christopher McDonald were cast as Daily Planet employees Steve Lombard, Cat Grant, and Ron Troop in June. Hoover previously appeared in several of Gunn's films. Corenswet and Brosnahan filmed a 12-minute interview scene together, which Gunn described as 10% of the film shot in 2 days, and highlighted their chemistry as palpable. The 1940 film His Girl Friday was a major reference for depicting their relationship as equal match for each other with a longing romance and witty comedy inspired by the works of Preston Sturges. Characters from the animated DCU series Creature Commandos 2024 present were expected to appear in the film, and Gunn and Safran intended for the same actors to portray characters across animation and live action in the DCU. Set photos revealed that Frank Grillo was reprised his role as Rick Flag Sr. from that series. The production moved to Northeast Ohio on June 14th, when filming took place at the Headlands Beach State Park in Mentor, Ohio. 6 weeks of filming took place throughout Cleveland, beginning in downtown Cleveland on June 24. 203 filming locations included Ontario Street, the Cleveland Greyhound Station, Public Square, the Detroit Superior Bridge, PNC Plaza, Progressive Field, and Cleveland Arcade. Exterior shots of the Huntington Bank Building, Key Tower, and the Soldiers and Sailors Monument were filmed in Public Square. The exterior of the Leader building stood in for the headquarters of the Daily Planet, and Key Tower was used as the headquarters for Stag Enterprises. Filming in Cleveland was completed on July 16th, when Gunn said there were a couple weeks left of shooting. The production moved to Cincinnati by July 18th, taking place at the Cincinnati Museum Center, in Union Terminal, and in the Lytle Tunnel. Filming wrapped on July 30th. Post-production. In August 2024, Sean Gunn confirmed his casting as Maxwell Lord for the film. The following month, Alan Tudyk was revealed to have a role in the film after voicing several characters in Creature Commandos. Tudyk voices the Superman robot for. Wade revealed that Krypto was appearing in the film, which Gunn officially confirmed in October. He explained that the character's portrayal was inspired by his dog Ozu, who was adopted soon after Gunn began writing Superman, and said Ozu was at first problematic to say the least. I remember thinking, gosh, how difficult would life be if Ozu had superpowers? And thus Krypto came into the script and changed the shape of the story. How can you take a character like this, who's perceived as old-fashioned by many? There have been so many different permutations of the character throughout the years. So how could you do it for a modern audience? I knew what I wanted to do in creating a story that was both utterly human and utterly fantastic. It has all the fantastic elements that we've never really seen in a Superman movie. The flying dog, the giant kaiju, pocket universes, science, and sorcery, and all these things that were in the old Max Fleischer cartoons. Writer and director James Gunn discussing the film in April 2025. Gunn began test screening the film by the start of December. A day and a half of individual pickup shots were scheduled to take place in Los Angeles shortly after, which Gunn said was to enhance the film rather than reshoot any scenes. Alcock was confirmed to be appearing in the film in January 2025. 3 days of pickups had also taken place in Atlanta by the end of May, and Gunn said the film was completed and received a picture lock on June 5th. Later that month, Michael Rooker and Clementi were confirmed to have voiced two Superman robots alongside Cooper and Angela Serafian as Superman's Kryptonian parents Jor-El and Lar Lor-Van. William Hoy and Craig Alpert co-edited the film after they respectively worked on the DC films of Batman and Blue Beetle 2023. Much of the visual effects team from Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 returned to work with Gunn on Superman, including visual effects supervisor Stephen Soretti. Visual effects were provided by Framestore, Industrial Light and Magic, and Weta FX. Main article: Superman 2025 soundtrack. In December 2023, Gunn said most of the film's score and major themes had been written, but the composer had not been announced because their deal had not been finalized. In February 2024, he announced that John Murphy was composing the score after doing so for the Suicide Squad, the Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special 2022, and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. In December, Gunn confirmed that Murphy was using a new version of John Williams' Superman March theme from the 1978 Superman film. Gunn considered Williams' score to be one of the greatest of all time and had associated his theme with Superman from the start of the film's development. He saw the theme's inclusion as one way for the film to harken back to past iterations. Unlike other projects by Gunn, Superman only features two licensed songs, Punk Rocker by Teddy Bears and Iggy Pop, and 5 Years' Time by Noah and the Whale. In April 2025, David Fleming was revealed to be contributing some music and sharing credit for the score with Murphy. On the soundtrack, Saffron's daughter Lulu performs a song with the American rock band Foxy Shazam, with Lulu and the band's member Eric Nally on vocals, and written by Gunn and Nally. Comic book cover with Superman sitting in the clouds above a city. Writer and director James Gunn took specific inspiration from the comic book series All-Star Superman, 2005 to 2008, by Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely. He included the cover art for the comic's first issue pictured in the film's announcement. For the January 2023 announcement, Gunn used the cover art of All-Star Superman's first issue to represent the film. He also posted the cover on social media in March when confirming that he would direct the film. Gunn marked the beginning of filming in February 2024 by posting a picture of Superman's logo, which commentators noted for its visual similarity to the character's costume in the Kingdom Come comic book, albeit with the classic yellow and red color scheme. Saffron promoted the film on stage during Warner Brothers' CinemaCon presentation in April, with Gunn, Corenswet, and Brosnahan appearing via video messages. The panel unveiled a full look at the Superman emblem, and Gunn said he planned to attend the following year's event in person with the cast to initiate a Summer of Superman. Gunn released a first-look image of Corenswet in costume in early May, which depicts Superman suiting up while an alien-looking threat attacks in the background. Commentary on the image focused on the return of red briefs, which were not included in the Man of Steel design. Elements of the costume were also compared to Jim Lee's design used in DC Comics' 2011 New 52 initiative. The character's pose and the attack in the background led to speculation about Superman's characterization in the film and what threats he may face. A display inspired by the film's Fortress of Solitude was included at Warner Bros.' Licensing Expo booth in Las Vegas later in May. Gunn released the first image of Krypto alongside Corenswet Superman in October 2024 in honor of Adopt a Sheltered Dog Month. A motion poster was released on December 16 featuring a slowed-down rendition of John Williams' Superman March with an electric guitar opening. Jordan Morrow at Variety described the poster as an homage to Christopher Reeve's portrayal of Superman in the 1978 film, but with quieter, more thoughtful music. A teaser trailer was shown at a press screening that day ahead of a public release on December 19th. The trailer had over 250 million global views in its first 24 hours, making it the most viewed and discussed trailer for a DC Comics or Warner Bros. Film in that time period. Water Tower Music released Murphy's music for the trailer as a single titled Theme from Superman trailer version. Later that day, Animal Planet's Puppy Bowl XXI on Super Bowl Sunday in February 2025 was co-sponsored by the film, with Gunn and Ozu appearing to introduce new footage. A Krypto Superplay award was presented to one of the puppies participating in the game. At the end of the month, DC Studios hired Ricky Strauss, a former marketing executive at Apple TV Plus and Disney, to consult on the film's marketing following the exit of Warner Bros. Global marketing chief Josh Goldston the prior month. Safran said Zaslav had rallied the entire company behind the film in a similar way to previous successful Warner Bros. Films, such as Barbie 2023. Gunn, Corenswet, Brosnahan, and Hoult promoted the film during Warner Bros.' CinemaCon panel in April 2025, where an extended sequence and new behind-the-scenes footage were shown. The extended footage was later released online and shown before IMAX screenings for the Warner Bros. Film A Minecraft movie, while behind-the-scenes footage was released on April 18 to coincide with the anniversary of Superman's debut in Action Comics #1, 1938. Commentators highlighted the focus on Krypto and his relationship with Superman in the extended footage, and the behind-the-scenes footage's emphasis on Superman's hopefulness alongside the elaborate sets and costumes. An official trailer was released on May 14th, which Ray Flick at Bleeding Cool called a banger, highlighting its action, humor, and supporting DC characters. He said the trailer proved that Superman was in the right hands with Gunn's interpretation, and that it was definitely the Superman we need in our lives, now more than ever. IGN's Wesley Eanpool highlighted Kent and Lane's relationship, and felt the trailer's interview highlighted the ethics of Superman's intervention in a foreign war, which Polygon's Michael McWhorter also commented upon, noting that the trailer questioned if Superman's actions represented American values. A prequel junior novel, Superman, Welcome to Metropolis, was released in early June and explores the early career of Clark and Lois at the Daily Planet, the Justice Gang members, and features the character Metallo. A final trailer was released on June 11th, 1 month before the film's release. Jermaine Lucier of Gizmodo called it the most revealing trailer to date and highlighted the trailer's visual effects and action sequences and its depiction of Luthor's hatred for Superman. 250 Total Films' George Marston speculated that Superman would be working both with and against the Justice Gang based on scenes of him collaborating with Mr. Terrific and Gardner being at odds with Superman, while Ernesto Valenzuela from MovieWeb felt Luthor's initial monologue being superseded by Superman's optimism was a brilliant way to construct this trailer. Producer Peter Safran in June 2025. Superman producer Peter Safran promoting the film in Manila in June 2025. The first 30 minutes of the film were shown at Cine Europe in Barcelona on June 17th and in Manila on June 19th as the start of the Superman World Tour, which took place in 7 major international cities leading up to the film's release. Veda Luna Zabala at Nylon Manila described the footage as fun, colorful, and hopeful, and highlighted Hoult's performance. 255 and 11 feet, 3.4 meters. Tall Superman statue modeled after Corenswet was suspended at the top of the Shard in London on July 1st, encouraging pedestrians to look up. This was the highest public sculpture put on display in the United Kingdom, and it took 4 months to be crafted. 25 pop-up Daily Planet newsstand kiosks were also installed at multiple locations throughout London. Warner Brothers hosted a fan event for Superman on July 2nd at Cineworld Leicester Square in London. The film partnered with Fandango and Amazon Prime for early access theatrical screenings on July 8th, which became Fandango's best-selling first-day pre-sale tickets for that year, surpassing the general pre-sale tickets for Marvel's The Fantastic Four. First Steps, also releasing that month. The Lola Cars Formula E team ran a special livery based on the film for the 2025 Berlin E-Prix. Funko and McFarlane Toys are set to release action figures based on the film. The Hollywood Reporter reported that DC Studios and Warner Brothers could spend approximately $200 million on marketing. Leading up to the film's release and amid the mass deportations during the second presidency of U.S. President Donald Trump, Gunn said that Superman is a story of America and an immigrant that came from other places and populated the country. But for me, it is mostly a story that says basic human kindness is a value and is something we have lost. This received backlash from some supporters of Trump and members of the MAGA movement, with some pundits on Fox News calling the film super woke. But Gunn responded that Superman was for everyone, explaining that it was about kindness, and I think that's something everyone can relate to. Release. Superman premiered at the TCL Chinese Theater on July 7, 2025, and was released theatrically by Warner Brothers Pictures internationally on July 9th, and in the United States and China on July 11th in IMAX, Real D 3D, Dolby Cinema, ScreenX, and 4DX. In January 2025, the estate of Superman co-creator Joe Shuster filed a lawsuit against WBD, asserting that the rights to distribute the film in some international territories had reverted to them based on different copyright laws. The United Kingdom, Ireland, and Australia in 2017, and Canada in 2021. 2 months later, WBD filed a motion to dismiss the lawsuit, citing prior copyright lawsuits being rejected, and it was dismissed in April due to a lack of jurisdiction. The lawsuit was refiled with the New York Supreme Court a month later, with an injunction requested, but the motion was denied in early June. Box office. As of July 20th, 2025, Superman has grossed $235 million in the United States and Canada, and $172 million in other territories, for a worldwide total of $407 million. At the start of June 2025, The Wrap reported that Superman needed to gross more than $500 million worldwide to become profitable at the box office, but that it would need to earn around $700 million to be considered success. The Hollywood Reporter estimated that the film could have a domestic opening weekend of around $175 million and a potential global total of over $1 billion, based on first full trailer's engagement metrics, while noting production and marketing costs accounted for a total of around $400 million. 3 weeks ahead of the film's release, Superman was projected to earn $125 to $145 million, or approximately $135 million, in its domestic opening weekend, which would be higher than the debut of Man of Steel, $116 million. DC Studios and Warner Brothers estimated a more conservative debut of $90 to $125 million, while a potential $175 million debut remained projected, which would surpass the debut of Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, $166 million, as the biggest opening for a DC film. In the week of release, Deadline Hollywood projected the film's domestic opening gross to be around $115 to $130 million. Domestic, on July 10th, Deadline Hollywood reported the film earned $2.8 million from Tuesday previews for an estimated total $21 million, including Thursday previews. Final Thursday previews would see the film make $22.5 million. When counting both theatrical and Tuesday Amazon Prime screenings, $2.8 million. This was the best preview box office for any film released in the year 2025, as well as a record for any film involving James Gunn. This was also higher than the previous preview box office record Warner Brothers achieved with Barbie. The film was now projected to make $115 to $121 million at the domestic box office during its opening weekend, and over $210 million worldwide during this time as well. The film made $56.5 million on its first day, the second highest of 2025, behind a Minecraft movie. It ended up debuting to $125 million, finishing atop the box office and becoming the biggest opening weekend for a standalone Superman film ahead of Man of Steel 2013, which opened $116.6 million, as well as the second biggest opening weekend for a film featuring Superman, behind Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, $166 million in 2016. It also scored the third highest opening weekend for a 2025 film, behind a Minecraft movie and Lilo and Stitch. In its second weekend, the film remained in first place, grossing $57 million. This marked a 54% drop, which was deemed better than other superhero films of 2025 up until that point, such as Captain America, Brave New World, 68%, and Thunderbolts**, 56%, attributed to positive word of mouth, with ComScore analyst Paul Derger-Bedian pointing out that the film's second weekend drop is indicative of a marketplace that's embracing the film. International. In its opening weekend, the film made an estimated $95 million from international markets, for a total gross of $220 million. The film's highest-grossing territories include the United Kingdom, $9.8 million, Mexico, $8.8 million, China, $6.6 million, Brazil, $5.9 million, Australia, $5.3 million, France, $4.2 million, Korea, $4.2 million, India, $3.8 million, Spain, $2.9 million, and Japan, $2.5 million. Its perceived underperformance outside of the United States and Canada, particularly in markets like China, where it debuted in fourth place, was partially attributed to character's American patriotic roots, with David A. Gross from a franchise movie consulting firm stating, "Superman has always been identified as a quintessentially American character and story, and in some parts of the world, America is currently not enjoying its greatest popularity." Critical response. Actors David Corenswet and Rachel Brosnahan in June 2025. Stars David Corenswet left and Rachel Brosnahan right, promoting the film in Manila in June 2025. On the review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes, 83% of 422 critics' reviews are positive. The website's consensus reads, "Pulling off a heroic feat of fleshing out a dynamic new world while putting its champions big, beating heart front and center. This Superman flies high as a man of tomorrow grounded in the here and now." 289 Metacritic, which uses a weighted average, assigned the film a score of 68 out of 100 based on 58 critics, indicating generally favorable reviews. Positive reviews tended to highlight Gunn's fun, colorful, and earnest approach, with praise for Corenswet and Brosnahan, while negative reviews called it frenetic and overcrowded. Audiences polled by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of A- on an A+ to F scale, the same as Man of Steel. Those surveyed by PostTrack gave it an 86% positive score, and 74% said they would definitely recommend it. IGN rated the film 8 out of 10, calling it wonderfully entertaining and heartfelt. Scott Phillips of Forbes praised its colorful visuals, humor, and light-hearted tone. Trey Silver of Awards Watch welcomed its no origin story, no crossover approach. Jake Cole of Slant Magazine argued the character endures because he transcends passing trends. Cody Derricks of Next Best Picture felt the casting is as pitch perfect as Christopher Reeves was decades ago. Writing for NPR, Glenn Weldon gave the film a positive review, stating that it delivers a Superman deeply in touch with his humanity and perfectly representative of the essence of the character. Liz Shannon Miller of Consequence called it a movie that doesn't sacrifice its titular character in service to franchise building. Instead, it focuses on celebrating the values that Superman himself has embodied from the beginning. William Bibiani of The Wrap wrote, "James Gunn tried to make a great Superman movie, one that embraces the wonder of the character as an action hero and a moral paragon, which derives its drama from how people react to his faith in us. He succeeded." Nicholas Barber at BBC Culture gave the film 3 stars out of 5 and wrote, "It takes some gall to make a $1 zillion Hollywood blockbuster that feels so much like an eccentric sci-fi B-movie. Alyssa Wilkinson of the New York Times called it a goofy yet charming take and compared it to Iron Man 2008. Variety's Owen Gleiberman praised the performances and gave it a positive review. David Crow of Den of Geek said the film achieves true grace when it narrows its focus to Lois and Clark. Among more negative notices, Peter Bradshaw of The Guardian gave the film 2 stars out of 5, criticizing its pointless, cluttered backstory and yet another CGI city-leveling finale. In a 2 out of 5 review for Empire, Sophie Butcher described it as bold and bright and full of color and cosmic invention, but added that the final act sinks into CGI chaos, with an unsatisfying climax, an eye-roll-inducing reveal, a restlessly intermittent tone, and an insistence on prioritizing things and people we don't really care about over core characters. Eric Kane gave the film 2 out of 5 for Forbes, writing that the massive cast finds itself in an overstuffed, badly paced plot, and that the story moves from one action sequence to the next, racing forward at a breakneck pace that leaves little room for character development. Mark Kermode described the film as tonally all over the place and messy, but that the film was unexpectedly good fun and overall enjoyable. Accolades. Superman was nominated for Most Anticipated Film at the 8th Astra Mid-Season Movie Awards. The Trailer Fight was nominated for Best Summer 2025 Blockbuster Trailer at the 2025 Golden Trailer Awards. Future. Shortly after the release of the film, it was reported that James Gunn and Peter Safran were considering making spin-off shows centered on Mr. Terrific and Jimmy Olsen. It was also reported that DC Studios intends to include David Corenswet's Superman and DCU versions of Batman and Wonder Woman in a Justice League film. Corenswet said in an interview with Vanity Fair that he has signed on for a potential Superman sequel. Variety reported that Warner Brothers has sequel options on Corenswet and Brosnahan, but a sequel announcement does not appear to be imminent. Now it's your turn. Did this Superman win your heart, or lose his moral balance? Are the politics elevating or derailing the legend? Will Gunn's DCU stay true to its hero's path? Smash that like for solar-powered hope. Subscribe to Starlight Production for more deep dives into the evolving DC universe. Next up, is Batman truly next, or is Supergirl the future? Until next time, up, and away. Before I saw James Gunn's new Superman movie, which sets out to lay the cornerstone of a new era for DC superhero characters, I was pessimistic. Over my years as a critic, I've loved a few Gunn projects for their humor and cleverness, Slither, Guardians of the Galaxy, but more recently hated others for their adolescent glibness, Peacemaker, and cheap sentimentality, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, respectively. But I've spent far more years, decades in fact, as a Superman fan. A few years back I channeled that fandom into an egregiously nerdy form of scholarship when I wrote Superman, the unauthorized biography, a cultural history of the character that tracks which aspects of him have changed over the years and why, and which have remained constant and why. Here's the TLDR for that book. The 2 central definitive attributes to any Superman story are selflessness and resolve. He must always, 1. Put the needs of others before those of himself, and 2. Refuse to give up. If either of those factors are missing, our minds rebel. It's simply not Superman. But having now seen Gunn's Superman, I'm prepared to add a third essential attribute to the idiomatic fuel mixture that makes Superman Superman, which this film illustrates with embracing clarity and humor. He's corny. The Red Trunks Diaries. The first word we see Superman, David Corenswet, say on screen, he mutters it to himself, having just had his big red but entirely handed him the fight, is, golly. Throughout the film, he peppers his dialogue with the occasional gosh. Later, Lois Lane, Rachel Brosnahan, makes fun of his taste in music, bland, radio-friendly pop-punk. When questioned about his reasons for performing a certain super deed that saved thousands of lives, his response is incredulity. Why? I mean to do good, for you know good. At one point, instead of gloating over a fallen foe, he launches into an impassioned speech about his abject love of humanity and his own all-too-human fallibility. In terms of visual iconography, Gunn not only returns a classic red trunks to the Superman costume, he doubles down on them. He makes sure they evoke an old-school circus strongman, as the character's original illustrator Joe Shuster intended, which means in the 2025 of sleek, sweat-wicking athleisure, they resolutely, even defiantly, resemble nothing so much as granny panties. Deal with it. And as for resolve, he's got that in spades. This Superman starts the film bruised, bloody, battered, but unbowed, and will spend much of his running time getting further hammered and lasered, and imprisoned and kryptonite poisoned by evil billionaire Lex Luthor, Nicholas Hoult. Luthor's goal is the annihilation of Superman, and he's using everything in his considerable power to get it, from nanite-enhanced goons to international conflicts to social media smear campaigns. This is another one of those films in which incessant television broadcasts act as a kind of electronic Greek chorus, helpfully informing us of major, albeit seemingly instantaneous, shifts in public opinion. But every time he's brought low, the Superman rallies and returns to the fray. All of this, of course, is corny, hokey, cheesy, achingly sincere, cringe even, which is to say, it's Superman. Recent attempts to tell live-action Superman stories have shied away from his bright, hopeful, altruistic nature in favor of making him more cool and relatable red, dark and brooding. That's not who he is. It never has been. Superman is an ideal. He represents the best we can aspire to be. He's not the hero you relate to, a la Peter Parker/Spider-Man's ongoing struggle to pay his rent and buy Aunt May her damn medicine. He's the hero who inspires you, who shows you the way we Superman now. Every era gets the Superman it needs. Richard Donner's grand, mythic, unapologetically hopeful Superman, the movie, 1978, arrived in the wake of Vietnam and Watergate, when America had sunk into a defensive cynicism. Gunn's Superman arrives at yet another time in American history when everything that we ostensibly stand for, bedrock American principles like justice for all, defending the defenseless, helping those in need, feel out of reach. It's inspiring to be reminded what those ideals look like, even if Superman and Superman shows them to us through a bright, aspirational lens. If that seems at all radical, chalk it up to the fact that our early aughts cultural fascination with antiheroes like Walter White and Don Draper sloshed over into our superheroes at some point. It's not just the old schoolers like Batman and Iron Man. Now, every jabroni in tights has a dark outlook and a troubled past. This year alone, the Thunderbolts Asterisk battled a superpower personification of regret itself. And over on Disney Plus S. Ironheart, our ostensible hero was so mired in guilt that she slid into a life of crime and drew the attention of the MCU's literal devil. But there's always been another way. It doesn't have to be about slogging through trauma and shame and shadow selves and endlessly tedious redemption arcs. Sometimes it's simpler, cleaner, brighter. And also, not for nothing, more fun, sheer elegance. Again and again in Gunn's film, we watch Superman placing himself between innocent civilians and mortal danger, saving individual lives. Which brings me to the very simple reason why Gunn's movie works, as well as it does. It makes you want to cheer. That's it. That's the secret ingredient that's been missing from so many superhero stories for so long. You come to a Superman movie to feel that surge of elation, that vicarious joy that moves you to cheer and applaud the events on screen. If you've ever found yourself in a crowded theater and got swept up in such a moment, Avengers, Endgame's iconic on your left scene, for example, you remember it for the rest of your life. I felt that surge of joy several times, watching Superman, and the crowd around me felt it too. Admittedly, we weren't always cheering for Superman himself. At one point, Eddie Gathaige's Mr. Terrific, one of several C-list DC heroes appearing in the film, gets a moment of his own that elicited cries of appreciation from my crowd. This is notable, because in the comics he's famously the third smartest man in the world, but just comes off as a dour stiff. Gathaige's take is much more fun, and more in keeping with how anyone possessed of such world-class intelligence would act in real life, namely, perpetually and performatively annoyed at having to be surrounded by stupid people. Mostly, though, we were cheering for the dog. Krypto is a superpowered and super poorly trained dog in a cape, and he's resolutely awesome. He gets several cheerable moments. Bless his foofy little ears. I should perhaps mention here that the original draft of my book about Superman included 5,000 words on the fascinating history and abiding importance of Krypto in all his awesomeness, which were cruelly cut down to a single paragraph by my editor, because in his words, nobody cares about the damn dog. When Gunn's crypto emerges as the breakout character find of 2025, history will have proven me right. You already believe a man can fly. Caveats? Well, Hoult's Luther is fun, though he doesn't get a chance to do much more than preen and explain his motivations to absolutely anyone and everyone within earshot. At any given moment, you can't help thinking you're getting maybe 60% of what Hoult could bring. At one point in the movie, a citizen of Metropolis, a person of color, is used as a prop to establish just how villainous our villain is. It's shocking, because the sudden act of violence seems so out of keeping with the bright tone of the film, but also because it seems like a kind of vestigial tale, a wildly unnecessary holdover from action films of the 70s and 80s. But on a broader level, Gunn's film is very good at what it sets out to do. It delivers a Superman deeply in touch with his humanity and perfectly representative of the essence of the character. What it doesn't do, particularly, is break much in the way of new ground. Recent attempts to tell live-action Superman stories have shied away from his bright, hopeful, altruistic nature in favor of making him more cool and relatable, red, dark and brooding. That's not who he is. It never has been. It lacks the grand sweep and scope of Donner's 1978 film, which had a much heavier lift. It had to establish the mythic quality necessary for audiences to believe a man can fly. But Gunn doesn't need to establish that. He can draft off of the decades of Superman film and television projects that have landed since 1978 to do the world-building work. So he doesn't waste our time with any of it. As the film opens, Superman is a known presence. Clark and Lois are dating. Luther hates Superman. While it hits a lot of narrative beats that have been hit before in previous films, television series, and comics, we get another Pa Kent Clark. It's your actions that make you who you are. Speech, for example, at least it hits them cleanly and it doesn't apologize for them. But as a result, the film can't help but feel smaller and more circumspect than the grander, statelier Superman movies of Donner, Bryan Singer, and Zack Snyder. I'm not bringing Superman 3 and Superman 4 into this discussion, and you'll thank me for it. The feeling of watching it is similar to that of perusing an individual comic book. It's bright, colorful. It's crammed with characters who don't get quite enough to do. 2 brief scenes of the Daily Planet staff can only feint toward establishing them as individual characters. But it's inviting you into a universe that you may want to spend more time in. And staring up at you from the page is Corenswet's iconic, goofy, inspiring, cheesy Superman, preparing yet again to hurl himself in harm's way, because that's what he was made to do. Here's a film occupying the heart-sinking Venn diagram overlap between franchise exhaustion and AI soullessness. A film fatally unconvinced of the reason for its own existence. We'd all hoped that writer-director James Gunn, who was in charge of Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy movie series, might put some wind back beneath Superman's wings, or in his cape, or under his boots, or at any rate somewhere near his costume person. The Man of Steel needed a fresh start after his self-canceling contest in Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice in 2016, and getting mowed together with a lot of other utility superheroes in Justice League a year later. Though I will admit to enjoying the pure hubristic craziness of the lengthy Zack Snyder cut of that movie when it saw the light of day. But this, if it was to be a reboot, then really we need to get back to basics and be reminded why we like superheroes in the first place. And I do. And remember why they were exciting and escapist and fun. We needed the clarity and simplicity of something like the origin myth of the infant Superman arriving here from his doomed planet. Like Moses, destined to put heart back into an America hit by the Great Depression, hokey though all that may be. Yet from the very beginning, this new Superman is encumbered by a pointless and cluttered new backstory, which has to be explained in many wearisome intertitles flashed up on screen before anything happens at all. Only the repeated and laborious quotation of the great John Williams theme from the 1978 original reminds you of happier times. Superman, played with square-faced vanilla dullness by David Corenswet, has recently taken upon himself to intervene in a war between 2 fancifully named fictional nation-states. Why this war in particular, and none of the many others happening all over the globe, you ask? Perhaps because these countries are so palpably made up and without inconvenient political associations and implications. The evil aggressor Borovaya, conceivably like Putin's Russia but not really, has invaded the nice people of Jarinpur, possibly resembling Zelensky's Ukraine, but not so as you'd notice. Superman had flown in to help the Jarnpurians out, stalling the Boravian advance, but at personal cost to himself. He had his superhero ass mortifyingly kicked by some sort of metahuman being, occasioning another of his very uninteresting crises of confidence. His opponent was ostensibly from Boravia, but possibly under control of the wicked Lex Luthor, Nicholas Hoult, who insultingly affects not to know what planet Superman comes from, and has perhaps contrived the whole Boravia/Jarnper contest to undermine his archenemy. Meanwhile, in a civilian persona of Daily Planet reporter Clark Kent, Superman finds himself in serious relationship difficulties with fellow journalist Lois Lane, in which role Rachel Brosnahan channels Courtney Cox's Monica Geller from TV's Friends with such eerie precision it's difficult to believe it's not deliberate. Skylar Gisondo tries his best with the role of junior reporter Jimmy Olsen. That formidable actor Wendell Pierce is underused, or in fact simply not used, as Planet editor Perry White, and as Green Lantern has a subordinate semi-comic Justice Gang. Nathan Fillion raises some smiles. Yet, whatever machinations Lex Luthor gets up to, the ironic truth is that what undermines Superman in the eyes of the whole world is not anything he plans, but a belated revelation about what his parents Jor-El, Bradley Cooper, and Laura Lorvan, Angela Serafian, really intended for Superman on Earth, which leads to his facing a terrible crisis, exploited by the loathsome Luthor. But what is the point of a film so stymied in its digitally encoded and generically prescribed world that it can't even go through the motions, as that would imply some level of activity and signs of life? How many more superhero films in general, and Superman films in particular, do we need to see that all end with the same spectacular faux apocalypse in the big city with CGI skyscrapers collapsing? They were fun at first, but the thrill is gone. James Gunn's in medias res, Year 3 Supes is as chaotic as ensemble and as politically on the nose as you might only expect. But it's also the most fun and heartfelt DC entry we've had in decades. DC's biggest hitter. For those pushing 50, there's been a long line of contenders who have never really achieved what happened way back in 1978, when director Richard Donner and star Christopher Reeve defined a role for, well, the best part of half a century. Sure, they've had half a dozen other actors on the big and small screen with the tights, and try their best, some of them getting pretty damn close. Despite the noise of all the Snyder/Cavill lovers who will blindly hate on Gunn's reboot, there's some not inconsiderable merit to much of the work done in that saga, and the first 2 acts of Snyder's Man of Steel, Crow and Krypton, and then Coster and Kansas, are pretty emotionally heavyweight for both the character and the genre. But nobody nailed it from the outset, quite like Reeve. Nobody nailed Clark and Superman, the awkwardness, the innocence, the immense power but eternal quest to simply do good. Divisive as it may be in its punk rock rendering, Gunn's 2025 incarnation is certainly a step in the right direction, rendering what feels like a comic book brought to life, or a Superman/Justice League animated movie brought to life, injecting some much-needed fun into a hitherto pretty dour DC-verse. And if you appreciate all things Gunn from Guardians to Suicide Squad to Peacemaker, then it's just about exactly what you might expect from him for good and bad. By Cass Harlow, June 16, 2013. Great start, solid build-up, but unnecessarily dumb denouement. 3 years into his tour as Superman, and things are not easy for the Man of Steel. Facing political and social media flack for unilaterally intervening in a messy war, and finding himself the target of billionaire genius Lex. I hate illegal aliens Luthor, who has all the money and smarts to conjure up a dozen ways to bring down the man he has decided is his sworn mortal enemy. Superman 2025. Throwing us right into the middle of things, Superman gets off to a pretty clunky start, with Gunn wearing his fondness for ensemble efforts on his sleeve, introducing us to a half a dozen myriad old and new characters, and hoping we'll just hit the ground running with him. There's a superdog, there are good robots, there are superpowered villains, and a super gang as well. Justice Gang, which include the terminally useless Hawk Girl, a Green Lantern with really bad hair, and a guy with a T on his face. And, of course, Lois, Lex, Jimmy, and all the characters you might already be familiar with from most every other Superman movie. Shotgunning his way to submission, Gunn's leaning heavily in comedy will be divisive at best, but less controversial are some of his almost incidental choices, a spin-up variation of the classic theme, or a heated interview between Lois and Superman, which start to help the larger, wilder whole coalesce into something curiously effective. This is a pretty propulsive ride, with no introduction or origin story beyond a few opening words, and Lex Luthor's villainy really already in full swing before Supes even hits the screen. Gunn can tend to believe that audiences already know the basics. What they don't know, or haven't seen in live action in a long while, is his take on this A-League comic character. Packing a 3-hour movie into just over 2 hours, mostly by ditching that first act of setup and exposition, it's impressive that Superman manages to be more than just visually arresting, which it frequently very much is. With David Corenswet probably exactly the kind of Clark/Supes everybody has needed for a while now, very much a year 3 interpretation of both, reaching that point in his career as both, where he's visibly fatigued by the fact that it is still seemingly so hard to merely do the right thing and go home. It's a warm, flawed, but fun incarnation, and he works best opposite an absolutely superb. Who expect anything less Rachel Brosnahan as Lois. Perhaps surprisingly, Nicholas Hoult actually nails Lex pretty impressively too, managing to dial down the excessive neuroses of his last incarnation and bring an impression of pure genius and singular, psychopathically obsessive, misguided beliefs to the proceedings. The messy Justice Gang certainly don't hit the ground running, but damn if they don't strike it out of the park later. Nathan Fillion, who has actually played a different, more level-headed Hal Jordan Green Lantern in plenty of jail animated movies, almost a John Cena's Peacemaker of the lot, as the filterless guy Gardner Green Lantern middle fingering his way into stealing the limelight. If it wasn't for Eddie Gathage's initially uninspired Mr. Terrific getting his own superb classic 360 gun action scene, which is a contender for the most memorable set piece in the entire movie, and pretty much sets the stage for an unprecedented character turnaround. Shotgunning his way to submission, Gunn's leaning heavily in comedy will be divisive at best. Less effective is a now yawn-inducing nanotech for what could have otherwise been an interesting villain, an engineer. Although the nods to Superman 3 are welcome, some of the choppy Minecraft-esque depictions of proton rivers and the ensuing set pieces, the clunky shorts-wearing Metamorpho, Isabella Merced's Hawkgirl, and the obsession both Gunn and Raimi appear to have with prodding giant eyes. For all the well-earned love there is for Gunn's Guardians run, he's clearly a fan of an elephant gun approach to humor in all circumstances. And, again, it'll be very divisive here, as there are patently a lot of times when less would have definitely been more crypto's great but wantonly overused. And the treatment of both sets of Supes' parents is going to be controversial at best. Gunn not even coming close to touching the greatness of Crow/Costner in those respective roles. It would probably also be a good takeaway for not every DC superhero flick to end with massive-scale buildings crashing destruction, but there's so much heart and fun here that it'll be hard for many not to come away entertained in a way that a Superman film probably hasn't for quite some time. This is unabashed comic book movie making. You could absolutely see the inspiration in classic tales like All-Star Superman, and there are moments of genius, the background kaiju battle. Yes, Gunn's political commentary on war-for-profit invasions, immigration, U.S. supplying weapons to foreign territories, social media crucifixion, fake news, and much more are all pretty eye-rollingly heavy-handed. But that he manages to keep the momentum going with this as a backdrop is a win, even throw in some fairly liberal torture into the bargain, for a film that's tonally the antithesis of Snyder's. Gritty vision, there's a lot of hard violence here. It's a broad ensemble approach that thankfully doesn't entirely lose sight of its core hero, and all he stands for, perhaps not developing his character significantly, but arguably reestablishing him in a fashion that has been much needed for quite some time, and possibly gifting new audiences the new Superman that they might grow up with, in a brand new and extremely colorful universe packed with characters that DC might actually be able to do something with come the end of the movie. A Mr. Terrific spinoff may well prove the peacemaker from this. Yes, it's going to tank for a lot of Reeves superfans and cause a whole bunch of Snyder superfans to riot, but this is a world where probably all of these incarnations can and should coexist, and even if this is dismissed as little more than Gunn's live-action Justice League animated movie version, judging by the opening box office, eventually that's something everybody's going to have to accept. At least it's put Superman back on the map with a sense of hope and fun that nobody has had in a good long while. There are a handful of questions I ask myself after I've watched a movie. Perhaps the most important of these is whether I'd like to see it again. Sometimes, though rarely, I enjoy a film so much that I know I'll be back to the theater a second time before the theatrical run ends. This was the case with Dungeons and Dragons, Honor Among Thieves. Other times, I hop online to pre-order the 4K Blu-ray, like I did after seeing the How to Train Your Dragon live-action remake recently, and Ryan Coogler Sinners. The other question I ask is whether or not I'd recommend that my friends and family go see the movie in theaters or wait for it to come to streaming, unless it's a streaming movie, obviously. In some cases, of course, I simply don't recommend it at all. I'm sure you could map the various stages of my enjoyment and recommendation onto a star chart. One I'd see again gets 4 stars. One I pre-order to watch at home, 3.5 stars. One I suggest you wait to stream, 3 stars. Anything below that, well, I really want to love James Gunn Superman, but I won't be going back to the theaters to see it again, and I won't be pre-ordering the 4K Blu-ray, and I won't tell any of my friends or family to go see it. And honestly, I can't even recommend that you wait for streaming. This is one that you can safely skip. Go watch the 1978 movie again instead. That nearly 50-year-old movie flies where this one limps along, unsure what exactly it wants to be, what tone it should adopt, and why it even exists in the first place. It has its moments. It has some good laughs and fun action. But the more I think about it, the more I'm genuinely baffled at how this came to pass. How Gunn and DC could so utterly drop the ball. I wanted to love Superman despite being concerned after every single new trailer released for the flagship DCU film. This was hailed as a return to form for DC after years of mediocrity. The Cinderverse experiment had gone badly, and DC and Warner Brothers have struggled ever since to cobble together a cohesive cinematic universe to rival the MCU. Even as Marvel's cinematic oeuvre slid into increasing irrelevance, DC floundered. Only the rare non-DCU efforts seemed to stick the landing. The first Joker film, Matt Reeves as the Batman, the stellar HBO series The Penguin. Notably, all Gotham-flavored projects. Elsewhere, outside of reasonably decent efforts like the first Wonder Woman or Peacemaker, we were treated mostly to an incoherent mess. From The Flash to Black Adam. One box office disappointment after another. So much money spent on everything, but a good script. Gunn promised to fix this with Superman, the first in a wider reboot of the DC cinematic universe that would involve recasting all but Gunn's favorites, like John Cena's Peacemaker, who makes a brief cameo in Superman. But this is far from the triumph that DC needed to restore faith in the comic book movie. Rather than soar, Superman crashes and burns despite the best efforts of its sprawling cast. Mostly, this is a problem with the writing. David Corenswet is excellent as a younger, less gritty Man of Steel. I enjoyed Henry Cavill in the role, but was never among those fans who insisted he should return, that noon could ever replace him. At his best, Corenswet is exactly the gosh golly gee was American Superman of old, determined to protect innocence and save lives. I wish we got more of this and less of the brooding, hunched-over, down-in-the-mouth Superman this movie insists upon at every turn. I'm also not convinced of his chemistry with Lois Lane, played with sturdy confidence and just enough pluck by Rachel Brosnahan. However good both these actors are in their roles, whatever sparks fly are as artificial as the overbearing CGI. More on that in a minute. Nicholas Hoult does his level best with the billionaire corporate supervillain Lex Luthor, but the antagonist in this film plays more like an angry frat boy than a scheming mastermind. For all his scientific brilliance, he's found a way to create a pocket universe to use as a combination research facility / secret prison for bloggers and ex-girlfriends / warehouse for his angry social media propaganda monkeys. Luthor has very little in the way of memorable moments or lines. He's a classic mustache-swirling villain, but lacks substance and gravitas. His super evil plan to annex half of a third-world country and create his own kingdom is goofy more than anything. And no, it's just a comic book movie. Does not excuse how ludicrous his motivations are. Alas, Lex Luthor is as generic and forgettable as the rest of the film. The rest of the cast is, well, massive, bafflingly massive. There are so many characters in this movie, we never get a chance to care about any of them. Outside of one good scene between Clark and Lois, almost every frame is constantly packed with characters. Whether this is the admittedly very funny Justice Gang, Nathan Fillion's Green Lantern, Isabella Merced's Hawkgirl, and Eddie Gathegi seen stealing Mr. Terrific, or Lex and his lackeys. Superman is overstuffed, both in terms of cast and plot. The Justice Gang feels troublingly similar to Black Adam's Justice Society of America also, and honestly it's even more troubling how similar the two movies are. Mr. Terrific was a very fun character, though probably the entire Justice Gang should have been saved for a different movie. Same goes for Superman's cousin, Supergirl, who probably should have been left to a post-credit scene. Many of these characters are either underutilized. Wendell Pierce's Perry White basically chews on a cigar, that's his character, or weirdly mischaracterized. Ma and Pa Ken are the most stereotypical country bumpkins imaginable. Worse, Lex's girlfriend, Eve Teschmacher, Sarah Sampaio, is a ditzy blonde straight out of an 80s movie. It's shocking to see a woman portrayed this way in 2025, and I'm not one to usually get too ruffled over these things. Her relationship with Clark and Lois's colleague Jimmy Olsen, Skylar Gisondo, is frankly bizarre and mostly left unexplained in the film, but she's ultimately responsible for the key information that leads to Lex's downfall. So why portray her as such a stereotypical and wildly dated, dumb blonde? I did like Crypto the dog, however. I really like Crypto a lot. Perhaps the best line of the movie is Clark telling Lois, he isn't even a very good dog, but he's out there alone and scared. I have to find him. It was the one moment I felt anything at all during the film, at least any kind of real emotion. Maybe this should have just been Crypto and Superman, a movie about Soup and his puppy. I'd watch that movie again. The overstuffed cast finds itself in an equally overstuffed, badly paced plot. We begin in media res, 3 years after Superman has made his true nature known to the world. 3 weeks after he stopped a war between a powerful Eastern European nation and its weak Middle Eastern neighbor, a war we later learned was aided and abetted by Luthorcorp. The movie picks up 3 minutes after Superman lost his first fight, and we learn quickly that it was Lex's mysteriously masked goon, Ultraman, who gave him the beating. Largely thanks to an incredibly gimmicky strategy where Lex feeds Ultraman the moves he needs to use to beat Superman at his own game, a gimmick that returns in the final act, leading to an incredibly silly fight scene between the two metahumans. I have mixed feelings about skipping the origin story. From here, the movie only stops once or twice to take a breath. The story moves from one action sequence to the next, racing forward at a breakneck pace that leaves little room for character development. Lois Lane gets a few scenes, but she's quickly overshadowed by Mr. Terrific. Superman is lost in the shuffle, less a hero with agency forced to make hard choices, and more of a reactive force, hurtling between one crisis and the next. The one time he's presented with a hard choice of any kind, he's able to easily hand off his savior duties to the Justice Gang. The movie falls into so many superhero genre traps, it almost plays like accidental parody. Everything is chaos, but also too neat and tidy. There's a major calamity that threatens to end the world in the third act, but of course, as with all conflicts of this type, we know the world will not end. So there's very little tension or suspense. It's a foregone conclusion that Superman will stop Lex and save the day, and even if that's always going to be the case with Superman, making the stakes so impossibly huge ultimately makes him feel like no stakes at all. Smaller, more intimate and personal conflicts always work better for this very reason. The structure of the plot falls into a narrative trap we see in all sorts of movies. Events happen, and then other events happen. The movie moves from one event to the next not because there are consequences, but because that's what Gunn needs to have happen to get from point A to point B. When a story progresses, because characters make choices that lead to consequences that lead to conflict, that lead to more choices that lead to more consequences, we end up caring about the characters and what they do a lot more. We become invested. Matt Stone and Trey Parker note that the most important thing you can do in script writing is avoid and then between beats. What should happen instead, between every single beat, is either the word therefore or but. In Superman, every beat is connected by and then resulting in very little sense of causality or consequence whatsoever. Meanwhile, events constantly transpire that feel forced and unrealistic. When the Daily Planet crew finds real dirt on Lex, they publish the damning article from Mr. Terrific's flying saucer as they escape a collapsing metropolis. The news breaks everywhere almost instantly, despite world events like the total destruction of Metropolis and the outbreak of a new war also taking place at the exact same time. Perhaps I'm overly familiar with how news cycles work, but you only publish a story like this during the destruction of one of the largest cities in the country if you want to bury it, not if you want the truth out there. And perhaps I'm too familiar with the power of oligarchs, but I don't see a news article leading to the downfall of Lex Luthor. I just see him spinning it as fake news, lawyering up and getting out of jail free, with his army of monkeys working overtime to change public perception. Of course, you might think this means that Superman is just an example of poptimism the way the Man of Steel always has been. But Gunn not only overcorrects when it comes to redirecting the dark and gritty Cinderverse, he can't seem to settle on a tone. If this is an upbeat Superman movie, why does it feel so grim and cynical still? If anything, the optimism of Corenswet's Clark, Kent feels wedged into the plot in spite of itself. Most of the time, Superman is depressed or angry or getting beat to a pulp or having cans thrown at him or getting arrested. We learn that his biological parents on Krypton weren't actually good at all. They were basically just Viltrumites, the Krypton-like alien species from the excellent Prime Video series and graphic novels Invincible, who sent their son to Earth not to protect its people, but to rule and dominate them. He's supposed to take as many wives as possible to spread his superior genes. This leads to a running secret harem joke that falls pretty flat. The weirdly cynical nature of the movie stands in stark contrast to its purported optimism, and the incessant jokiness only makes matters worse. Sure, it has lots of funny moments, but the humor is all wrong for Superman. I love Guardians of the Galaxy, but where constant snark and Gunn's sense of humor work so well with Star-Lord and his crew, it feels wildly out of place in a Superman movie. Tonally, this movie is all over the place. The fact that you never really get to care about any of these characters the way you did for Rocket or Groot or Gamora or Drax doesn't help matters. None of this feels like Superman. Superman never feels special. You could replace him with any number of other superheroes in this movie, and it would work about the same. Whatever attempt to make this alien a stand-in for immigrants ultimately fall flat. A political message inserted without any conviction whatsoever. There is little in the way of conviction here at all. An assault on the eyes. Indeed, the only thing Gunn seems committed to in Superman is the oversaturated aesthetic. While some of the action scenes are fun and well choreographed, I found the overall look of the film distracting. I'm glad that it's colorful, but it has that cheap, plasticky, this is a commercial color palette that I find incredibly jarring. There are too many dizzying, wide-angle shots. The CGI is aggressive and overused. Some scenes, like a fight that takes place in an antiproton river in the Pocket Universe, feel almost more like a cartoon than live action, and not in a good way. Reusing the John Williams music from Richard Donner's 1978 film felt a little hokey as well. I think I would have enjoyed just having it in the trailers and getting a totally original score for this movie. The needle drops were pretty mixed as well, especially compared to Gunn's past films, though I did really like the closing song, Punk Rocker by the Teddy Bears featuring Iggy Pop. That'll be in my head for days. Between the overwritten plot, the sprawling cast, the neat and tidy resolution to the conflict and the glaring visuals, this is a Superman reboot that screams generic superhero movie at the top of its lungs. DC needed a Superman that could truly soar, and instead we got a predictable, run-of-the-mill, weirdly pedestrian movie that's mostly just painfully mediocre. James Gunn's fingerprints are all over this one, and I think that's the biggest problem. We needed a more straight-laced director to help Superman soar, and a script that tapped more earnestly into its universal themes of goodness and heroism, rather than just another superhero movie riddled with half-baked one-liners and the same old plot we've come to expect from the genre.